Hello and welcome to my channel. Hi, I'm Wendy J. Haney, and today I'm going to show you how to make a Blue Jay block. Yep, a while ago we did the cardinal, and so I figured, hey, it's time for a Blue Jay. Now, with that said, I have a couple of variations, and if you want a template for this with the colors and the layouts, email me at contact me at wendyjhaney.com. Kevin will post the link here, or the email address, and you can find it below too, probably. Anyway, and I can send you that. The cardinal is like this, and I couldn't decide whether I wanted to do a Blue Jay like really identical to it or slightly different. It depends on if you want to use them together. If you want to use them together in the same design, maybe you want them the same, or maybe not. Anyway, so I put together 3 different variations. So this one is identical. You know, your pinwheels and your greens and your browns. This one is slightly different. I've left off the half square triangle with green and the same there. And then my current one is just a little bit different as well. Put a few more greens in this corner and I shifted the brown. So they will all be in the template and you can decide which one you'd like to use when. The other thing is that we're going to be doing a lot of half square triangles. Now, if you're doing one block, my method that I'm going to show you today will work great. And if I'm going to go scrappy with my greens, we're all good. If you're going to make a lot of blocks, and using the same colors throughout those blocks, then you may want to check out my video on different ways to do half square triangles. 1, 2, 2, 4, and then there's another one for 8 at a time. All depends on how you want to do things. So this way, at least you'll get a taste of doing 1 at a time and 2 at a time. Okay, so what do we need? I'm going to set that up there so you can see that. Okay, for our brown, we're going to need I'm doing these 2 at a time. So we're going to do a 3-inch background and a 3-inch brown. For our greens, I decided to go scrappy this time with my greens. In fact, everything got pulled out of my scrap bins this time for this block and this one that I'm doing today. So I went scrappy for my greens. So you just need 6 2.5-inch squares of greens, all or different, and 6 2.5-inch squares of your background. For your light blue, which is in here, you need 3 2.5-inch squares, and we're doing just 1 half square triangle, so you need a 2.5-inch square of your blue and a 2.5-inch square of your background. Your dark blue up here, we've got 4 half square triangles, so we're going to do those 2 at a time, using 2 3-inch blocks of your blue and 2 3-inch blocks of your background. And then we've got our little straggler 2.5-inch square in the middle. Okay, and then you've got 5 2.5-inch squares of your background. And then finally, we're doing split square, what do they call them? Split square triangles. Yeah, I think that's what they're called. Split quarter square triangles. That's it. I should have written that down. Split quarter square triangles for our beak up here, which is those 2 blocks, and this one down here. So for our black beak, because we only need 1 of those, we're going to make our first half square triangle that we need with a 2.5-inch background and a 2.5-inch block. And then you could go a 2.5-inch background if you wanted, but I decided to go a 3-inch that gives you a little wiggle room to adjust and trim down. And if you're concerned about this, you could always bump these up to 3" also, or 2 3/4 to give yourself a little wiggle room. Then we need 2 of these quarter square triangles. So we can create our half square triangle here with our 2.5" dark blue and our 2.5" background. And then once again, I'm doing a 3" for the larger square. Okay, with that said, most of these half square triangles are 2.5" unfinished, and we're starting with 2.5" squares. Great. There isn't going to be any trim down. That's something I usually do when I'm creating multiples of things. So in this case, there's no trimming down. If you feel like you don't yet have an accurate 1/4" and you want the ability to trim down those half square triangles, then make your 2.5" squares, bump them up a 1/4". Go 2.75". It's up to you with what works. So if you do that, then that means you're going to trim up all your half square triangles down to 2.5". So keep that in mind. I'm going straight 2.5" because hit the scrap bin and I have a lot of 2.5" strip scraps. Okay, so with that said, I'm checking my notes here. You're going to need 14 2.5" squares of your background, 2 2.5" squares of your dark blue, 4 2.5" squares of your light blue, and 1 2.5" squares of your black. From the 3" squares, you're going to need 4 of your background, 1 of your brown, 4 dark blue. Okay, so that's what you're going to need. Let's start with this. We're going to start with our 1/4 square triangle of our beak. Okay, so I have 2.5" squares of my black and my background. What you're going to want to do is you're going to go and put a line corner to corner. So if you have a good accurate square, corner to corner. And I'm actually, in this case, because we're going to stitch on this line, I'm using a Micron 01 Pigma pen. It is super fine. And I know when we cut and when we mark, anytime we can use the finest marking available, the more accurate we're going to be. So mark a line corner to corner, and then we're going to put right sides together of that background and your black. And in this time, you're going to sew on the line, okay? Let's go do that. I now have my square. I've stitched on my line. Now we're going to lop off one side of it. And I'm flipping over to this one because it's pressed. So I cut off a 1/4" from the line. I lopped off that corner, and then I'm pressing to the dark, and this one is fully pressed because you want to make sure you press that with an iron before you move to the next step. Then take this, and we're going to draw a line corner to corner and use this seam as a good indication to keep your angle straight also. This line should go on your seam, and then you can scoot that up, and if all is good with your seam and your angles and your square, you should be able to then mark corner to corner. And I'm using 2 different marking pens so that I can see it on both my light and my dark fabric. Okay, so now you've marked corner to corner. We're going to put it on top of your 3-inch block. And as you can see here, we have lots of extra room around the edges. If you want to go with a 3-inch squares for to make your half square triangle, that works too. And then you'll just do a little more trimming up. Whatever works for you. I was just trying to use a lot of 2.5-inch strips that I had with my black. Okay, you're going to put that on there and you're going to stitch on the line. Okay? I need to go do that so I can show you the next step. Now we have that done. And what we're going to do is cut a 1/4 inch away from that seam. Now here is a very important step. Otherwise, if you cut this wrong, you will be very, very unhappy. Open it up and position the larger triangle to the lower left. Guess what? My black beak is supposed to be right here. Oops, it's not. That's not going to work. If you notice that to our template here. So if you match your template and you look at it, you go, that's not gonna work. Okay, so what if we turn it around, put my large triangle once again in the lower left and flip it up. Yes, my beak is where it's supposed to be, on the right-hand side. So this is the orientation you needed in order to trim, trim off that side. So we're going to do that and trim a 1/4 inch away from your stitch line. Okay, and you're going to open that up and go to the ironing board and press that. Okay, make sure you press that before you move on. I have this other one pressed. As you can see, this looks really weird. And that's because I started with a 2.5-inch squares to make my half square triangle. If you want to make them larger and go with 3-inch squares to make your half square triangle for this, go for it. Then you're going to have more around here and you're going to trim it all up to be 2.5. I had a lot of strips of 2.5-inch black, and so I went with that instead of trying to dig into bigger pieces. So we need to trim this so the whole thing is 2.5. Position your half square triangle side in the lower left. Actually, it doesn't matter. You're probably going to want it that way. So your angle here needs to go on your long seam there. Your corner here, the corner seam of your half square triangle, should go right in the corner with your 2.5. Okay, and if all is good, this should be 2.5-inch line, and this is on the edge of your fabric. And then we're going to lop off that edge and trim off the top. Okay, that looks nice and neat. We're going to flip it. And now this and this should all be on your 2.5. This should be your angle still. 2.5. Get that nice and neat. And if all is good, once again, your seam there should intersect right there to your 2.5 there. Your 2.5 is here and here. And now you trim again. Okay, there you go. You now have your beak, your 1/4 square triangle ready for that. Okay, now we're going to work on our blue 1/4 square triangles. And yep, I screwed up. I'm going to have Kevin edit the beginning as far as the number of blocks you need of the right colors. For this, we're going to need 2 half square triangles of our blue and our background. So using 2.5-inch squares and a background, Oops, that gets us one, which allows us to do just what we did with the beak. But if we want to make them two at a time, we're going to need to start with a 3-inch dark blue and a 3-inch background. And we're going to make our half square triangles two at a time. So in that case, I will edit the video and indicate the change in the number of blocks you need of each color. Apologize for that. So here we go. In this case, we're going to do this with two 3-inch blocks. We're going to once again mark our corner to corner. Actually, no, we're not going to mark corner to corner. My bad. We're going to use our Quilter's Magic Wand ruler, and we're going to put the center etched line in the middle, corner to corner, and then we're going to mark lines a 1/4 inch from the center. Okay, now we've marked our stitch line. So you're going to go put right sides together, your dark blue and your background, and you're going to stitch on those lines. Okay, we have our seams sewn, and now in this case we're going to cut in the middle, corner to corner. We're going to just cut between those, and look at here, we have two half square triangles. Now these are not 2.5 inch. They are over what we need, which is fine. Okay, I'm going to switch these out with two that I have pressed. You're going to want to press them first. Now we're going to grab our 3-inch blue blocks, and we're going to put these on top of it. Actually, before we do that, once again, we're going to mark corner to corner on these. Let me get my two marking pens. Just like before, you're going to do corner to corner, and if all is good, you should have a line that lines up right on your seam. Okay. Once those are marked, mark both of them. Then you're going to put them on your 3-inch dark blue, and you're going to stitch on the line. Now we have our two blocks and we've sewn on the line. Okay, once again, just like we did with our black beak, it's very important you understand the positioning of these quarter square triangles so you get this square combination correct. Okay, let's see, we're looking at this one up here, and so the large triangle is in the lower right. So if we flip this up, yep, I've got my background there, and my background, the background is to the left, the blue is to the top. Okay, that one looks good, which means we're going to trim here. On our other one, we needed to make sure the large triangle was on the upper left, and when I flip it up or flip it down, we've got our background to the right and the blue to the bottom. So these are opposites. Okay, so we're going to take this and, yep, okay, so we're going to trim on this side. Trim my 1/4 inch. Okay, take it to the ironing board, and this place I press to my dark, but also press this direction because there's fewer seams. Okay, now, just like we did, this one I have already pressed, so just like we did with the black one, we need to square this up. And in this regards, because we started with oversized blocks to make our half square triangles, we're going to actually have to trim those also. In this case, get your diagonal on your omni-grid ruler on your large triangle angle and position that there. Slide that down so that your 2.5 inch mark is right here on the corner of your other angle. This is important. It's not just as simple as putting this on here and trimming 2.5 all the way around. I'm going to take a picture of this for you. So get your 2.5 inch there. You got plenty to trim here on your 2.5. Got a little trim room over here. Not a lot. Uh-oh. My angle was off there. There we go. There we go. Sometimes it's hard to see on the blue. Okay. And we're going to trim that. Flip it around. Get your 2.5 inch on here. Your angle in the middle. This trim should be easier because your angle up here should already be intersecting at your 2.5, your 2.5 corner there with your angle, and up there. And we're ready to trim. There we go. So now we have one of our quarter square triangles. You're going to do the exact same thing with this one. Now we're going to work on our half square triangles for our dark blue and our background. And we need 4 of them. So we're doing them 2 at a time, oversized. So we're starting with our 3 inch blue background, dark blue background, and our 3 inch background. You should have 2 of each of those. You're going to use your magic ruler, corner to corner, mark your stitch lines. You're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch on your lines, just like before. And then you're going to come back and cut in the middle. That is going to give you 2 of these half square triangles, and they're going to be oversized, so we need to trim them up. Make sure I'm pressing them to the dark. Make sure you press them with the iron before you do your trim up to make sure they're accurate. Then, using your omni-grid ruler or your ruler of choice, put your line, your angled line on the seam, and then scoot it up to make sure that there's room to trim all the way around it after the 2.5 inch mark. Down here, you should have that on your line, and up here, your corner should be right on the edge of your 2.5. Trim this, flip it over, and now this should go right on your 2.5 inch mark on your ruler, as you see, and your line should still go on your seam. And there we go. If you're going to be making lots of these blocks, the 2 at a time method I would highly recommend. There we go. And you should end up with 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of these half square triangles all trimmed up. Okay. You're going to do the same thing with your brown because you need 2 half square triangles. Your 3 inch brown, your 3 inch background, mark exactly the same. Okay? You know how to do that. And now we've got a ton of half square triangles that are using 2.5 inch squares. You've got 6 of your green. You've got a light blue. Yeah, that's it. 6 of your green. Now, with your green, if you decide to go with one green color, then most definitely you need 6 of them. So I'd go with the 2 at a time method using your 3-inch blocks. Obviously that's going to change what you need, but that would be very efficient. I went scrappy, so I'm using 2.5-inch blocks, and then we only need 1 light blue. And that, I do believe, covers all those lovely half square triangles. Go get those done, and then we can start putting everything together. Okay, you should now have all your half square triangles done, all of your quarter square triangles done, and now we're ready to put things together. Woohoo! So we have our brown half square triangles, dark blue, our quarter square triangle dark blue, or with dark blue, quarter square triangle with black, half square triangle light blue, and 6 of the green. All right, now time to put it together. As I usually do, I get my template in front of me so that I can lay things out on the board before I start sewing them together. Okay, we've got our brown, we've got a dark blue, a green, and with the scrappy, I just put them out here to start with, and then I decide if I want to rearrange them later. Throw in our light blue squares and our solid background squares. Make sure you get your quarter square triangle in here the right direction, the right one up there. The other one goes up there next to our black. There we go. So we've got our beak thing going. Okay, there we go. Make sure you get your pinwheel. We've got 3/4 of a pinwheel up here. I decided not to complete my pinwheel so it's not completely identical to the cardinal. If you want to complete your full pinwheel up there, go ahead. And note down here, this is not an error. I did not do a pinwheel style in this corner, though you could. Once again, these are things that if you want to, switch this up a little to give it a unique twist for you, go ahead. And the template will show you 3 layouts that I had put together. Okay, there we go. We have our bird. Now we're ready to start putting things together. So I generally work by liking to set a group of things I'm going to sew all at once. So I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And what I've discovered lately is that I like to pinwheel my back. And so if you can see here, I like to pinwheel, but if I go and do too much sewing all at the same time, I end up with some of my pinwheels where, oops, it doesn't work with my seams. So we're going to sew fewer things together first and press them and get my pinwheels working before we move on to the next side, if that makes sense. And actually, you can sew them together, you just don't want to fully. Well, no, I take that back. Yeah, so we're going to sew this set together, 1/4 inch seam, making sure you, I usually do this and do a quick pin instead of lifting them up, because otherwise I have a tendency to lift them up and then, oops, accidentally stitch on the wrong side. Not happy when I do that. So put those together and stitch your 1/4 inch seam. Okay, I've moved my full block layout over to the right, and here we have our pairs of blocks. Okay, what I should have mentioned is for this one, you may have pressed to the dark originally, which I did, but then when you want to put these two together, in order to nest the seams, sorry, I'm going to flip this around. In order to nest the seams, one of these needs to be pressed towards the white. So I just go back to my iron and I repress it so that one is the opposite direction so I can nest these nicely and get my matching 1/4 inch there. This one doesn't matter. This one, you're going to be matching both up here and on the bottom. So, open that up and be careful on how you match your seams with both of those. Okay, now, here's the time to look at your pressing, and we're going to press and then sew these sets together. This one is logical to press to the left because there's no seams on this side. This one, half a dozen one, 6 of the other, doesn't matter. So press it the opposite, or if you feel that is too bulky, press this one open. Yep, every once in a while, it just makes sense to do that because of the bulk. So you could do that. In fact, I think I will, given the bulkiness of that. So I'm gonna press that open. This one, half a dozen one, 6 of the other, don't matter. So I'm gonna press it to the background. This one doesn't matter because you're gonna have a seam on both. So press it opposite of whichever one you did here. And once again, you've got a seam on both sides. So press it opposite of this one. Get those pressed so the seams are the way they're supposed to be. Then flip them over one at a time. And what I do is a lot of times I will take my pin and I will push it right through the intersection of my 1/4 inch and match it to the one underneath and get it so it lines up there. Okay, and then, yeah, then I get that and then I pin that, so that way when I'm sewing and I go right across there, I should have a nice match on both sides. So do that, pin these in pairs, then get all of this column of these 2 rows together, and then I'll show you how to pinwheel those and press them. Then we're going to move on to the next set. We now have our columns, 2 columns. Man, I never get that right. Our 2 columns sewn together. Now, a lot of times I've done, okay, now sew the next 2 columns together. And what I find is that it doesn't allow me to do the pinwheels the way I would like. They get a little out of whack. So now that you've got this, let's go to the back and pinwheel. So a lot of times people say, get the first 2 stitches with a seam ripper and get them out. Oh, heck. All you have to do is twist it, twist one seam up and the other seam down, and that intersection will twist. I rarely need a seam ripper to do this. So then you have your nice little pinwheel there. And I'm going to do that on each of these. And yes, it does mean sometimes that, okay, here I normally would like my seam up, but it's going to be down. In this case, let's see, am I getting a lot of benefit from twisting it here? You know what? Probably not. So I may just leave those up and not pinwheel that. Yeah. This one, I am probably not going to pinwheel because I have these seams open and both of these blocks don't have additional seams. So it's just fine if I, let's see here. What happens if I twist? Twist the other way. Yeah, I'm gonna leave them all pressed this way because if I twist, I'm gonna get a pretty serious bump right there with everything. So we're not gonna do that. This one, yeah. Yep, this one I'm going to leave up. So those are the things that as you're doing this and you're pressing, You make the decision. Go through and decide, oh, this pinwheel will eliminate bulk and not cause bulk somewhere else. This one, half a dozen one, six the other. This one, oh, definitely I'm pressing this way. This one that way, because I don't want a lot of bulk right here where we have so many things. Press those correctly. Then bring in your next row and do one. I'm missing. Yeah, they don't line up once you've stitched them there. And it would help if we do that. Oh, that would have been so bad. Orient it again. And then what I suggest you do is look at these and go, okay, this one, it won't matter. We're going to just stitch those. Stitch those. Yeah, so go and get this column all stitched together. Then we decide on pressing on this column based on that. It's the same with this. So go ahead and sew each of these together. Get your columns in order by sewing your pairs together, etc., keeping those done. Wow, I keep moving off my screen. Get your columns sewn together. Don't press them yet. And then we'll figure out the pressing just like we did with this one. Now that you have your columns done, what you're going to do is one at a time, based on the direction you pressed these seams, you're going to figure out and press these the opposite so they're nesting. Yep, it won't always make sense as if I would do them independently, but this is going to allow us to continue to pinwheel them. So go ahead and do that, and then before you move on to the next row, get these pinwheeled. So press these accordingly, stitch these together, and then pinwheel them. Then go ahead and do each of the other rows. And then it should be done. And there we have it. So if you followed my directions as far as doing a row, a column at a time, and then looking at where to pinwheel, this is what it should be, or close to it. Like I said, your decisions on where you want to pinwheel. But by doing it this way, you don't end up with, oh, I want to pinwheel that one, and this seam gets overlapped. So there you have it. I do believe I don't have any mistakes. And this should now be 10.5 inches square. So now you can use this and make something with this, or combine it with a cardinal. And just maybe, we'll have some additional blocks of birds that you can use to combine as well. So stay tuned and see what we have coming up. Take care, and thank you so much for watching, and happy quilting!